everyone, and welcome to Daily Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSikho. Today, we will discuss two articles in our newspaper analysis. The first one is from The Hindu, which is titled as Recognizing Sex Work as Work. So this article talks about giving not only the rescue operations to the sex workers, but also giving them rights to work if they want to do in this field. And if at all, these are only the involuntary or voluntary people, and what can be done for their betterment has been discussed in this article. The second article is from the Indian Express, which is titled as How to Bend the Third Wave. So this article talks about that taking the lessons from the first and especially the second wave of the COVID-19, how the third wave can be avoided and how proper delivery of vaccines can actually help us in doing so. Also, for the News in Flash column, we have now a separate and more exhaustive video on the News in Flash, which is available on LawSikho Judiciary Prep and LawSikho CLAT Prep channels. You can definitely subscribe the channels for visiting those videos. So this newspaper analysis is presented to you by me. My name is Sheva. I am a law graduate and had completed my law degree in the year 2019. I have been a national level debater and a public speaker, and here at LawSikho, I'm working as current affairs expert and manager for free content and outreach. If you wish to find me, you can always get me on Twitter as well as my LinkedIn handles. The links to both are available in the description box below. Let's see what is the multiple choice question from yesterday's discussion. World Environment Day is celebrated on. Your options are June 5th, June 1st, June 22nd, or none of the above. If you know the answer, you can put it down in the comment section below. This is the descriptive question for the day. Sex work should be considered as a dignified work for the women. Critically discuss. Please keep in mind that whenever the question has this term critically, it asks you to debate around both the sides of the given statement. That is, the merits as well as the demerits of the given argument. On this note, let's start our discussion for the day, which talks about recognizing sex work as work. So recently, the non-recognition of sex work has become a legitimate work. So many a times what we have seen is that many people have contested the argument that sex work has not been recognized as a legitimate work. And if at all a person is indulged into this work with his or her own consent, basically if we talk about prostitution specifically for women, if she's into this particular job on her own consent and she wishes and wills to do it, then this work should also be given the legitimate work, and the status should be made legitimate and not illegal. Though, as we know that prostitution is not legal in India, but yes, it is exercised and definitely it needs to be regulated. And many a times people also argue that if at all it is regulated by the government, there would be lesser chances of forced people or forced women to get into or involuntary workers to work as sex workers, and rather who all we will have would be those who wish to work in this field. Then there is an unextended government's relief programs as well, and due to which what happens is that since we have not recognized these workers as legitimate workers, so a lot of government relief programs are not, and they're never able to percolate to these people, and ultimately what happens is that they get into bigger plights and the situation even deteriorates further. And also, if we understand, the COVID-19 has caused greater brunt on them because obviously the people are keeping social distancing, and in such a situation, they would definitely not want to go to these brothels. And these brothels were the only area, or these were the only jobs through which these women were earning. And that is why in this regard, what has happened is that a greater brunt has been caused due to the COVID-19. So if at all we try to understand the background of the problems or the background of the entire sex work culture, so we need to understand that the legislation in India that works in this regard is the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act. Now the name itself, which was enacted in 1956, so the name itself is telling that whoever, according to us or the Indian legislations, would indulge into prostitution would be considered to be someone who is there for an immoral trafficking. And that is why we need to prevent this. But the need of the hour, as the article is pointing out, is that anyone who is indulged into this on involuntary purpose, that is through any kind of force or any kind of threat or any such situation, then definitely that person should not be doing this work, and the government and the various legislations of the government should move in direction to safeguard these people. But if at all any woman is very much willing and if she's adult and she can take her own decision, and she takes this decision that she wants to work as a sex worker, then we should make some provisions under the law that give her the legal status to do so, and thus a lot of government safeguards and policies are also extended to such people. So this act, which is the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, penalizes acts such as keeping a brothel, soliciting in a public place, living off the earning of sex work, and living with or habitually being in the company of a sex worker. So all of these things are penalized under the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, and definitely it should be now seen as in a wider angle and with a greater scope. And that is why maybe we should give it a chance that if at all we try to legally pursue this, or we try to give the legal status to this work as well, maybe there is a chance that this is made a little better. I can give you this a good example of this. For example, that drugs are not legal in the country, and definitely they should not be. But due to this, what happens is that the people, the peddlers, the people who deal in drugs, they have a lot of smart ways to get away with the law and to still be able to smuggle the drugs to and from one place to another. Due to this, what happens is that the government, which ideally should be able to keep a better check on these drugs smuggling and all these movements, is not able to do so because the people are very much aware that the law does not support this kind of activity. But on the other hand, tobacco, let's say the cigarettes, are still legal in the country. Of course, there are huge taxations and huge duties on these products, but still they're legal in the country. And that is why it becomes easier and more effective for the government to keep a track on the movement of these kinds of goods. And if at all the government wants that in a particular area, such tobacco or cigarette shops should not be there, like for example, near some colleges or education institutions, so that is easier for the government to regulate as compared to the drugs, which are even more drastic in nature. So this is just an idea of giving you as to when something is made legal or is brought or is recognized under the law, it becomes easier for the hands of the law to keep a grip on these particular things. Now, please do not consider that for this, the drugs should be made legal and then the government should be trying to bring these drugs down or something like that. But yes, there is definitely a contradicting example when we have the example for cigarettes and other kinds of tobacco products. Now let's understand that what is the plight of the sex workers in the country specifically. So mostly they enter, or the entry into this work, into the sex work, is involuntary, which means they do not want to do it. Then it is forced and through deception, wherein these women, what happens is that many a times these poor women who are uneducated, unaware of the world, they are brought to the cities, or they are moved from their hometowns, or they're moved to some other areas or places in order to be offered work. Now, as we know, all of us know about this, that wherein young girls, even, very little, very less aged girls also, they're moved to the cities in order to offer them work or opportunities for education and some things like that. So in a way, they're decepted, and that is why they're forced into this. Either they're sold to some kind of brothel holder, or any of these activities take place. And thus, these women definitely need to be rescued and rehabilitated, sometimes even without their consent. Yes, many a times they think that they might not be able to earn money now upon which their whole family is dependent or something like that. So they might not even consent to be rehabilitated, but still they need to be rescued and rehabilitated. But here also we need to understand that though even if 90% women are here involuntarily, that is without their consent, there is a good chance that many women are into this business or into this work on their own free will. And definitely they do not need any kind of rehabilitation. Rather, what they all need is rights. So they all need rights. That is, they need some recognition, maybe some benefits from the side of the government, some government policies to be extended. Maybe their children should be sent to schools or something like that. So definitely they do not want to be rescued. Rather, they want to be given some rights. And also for these women who are specifically engaged into as sex workers, they face the prejudice, and this prejudice exists, that these women who do this kind of work are morally devious. and people believe that they are not good at their moral character. Now, everybody who's listening to this discussion today, let's also think about that. Isn't morality very subjective? Now, something that might be immoral for me might not be immoral for you. For me, if a woman wears any kinds of short dresses, or if a man, does not choose to go out and work, rather chooses to stay home and take care of the children, that might not be, moral too. But it might not be the same case for anybody else. So that is why, just because a woman is indulged into this kind of work, or for the sex, as she works as a sex worker or something, I do not think that that can be the sole reason for testing or judging the morality or the character of that particular person. Because as we just noted down also, that many of the women that work in this field, they do not even work on their own will. And just because they do not have anything else to do, they need to survive for themselves, maybe their families, their children or stuff, they get involved into such work, and many times they're trafficked into such things as well. And if at all, if a woman chooses to do this on her own will, it is basically, see, it's her own body, it's her own bodily integrity, and it's her work. So I think we as responsible citizens should not be judging onto the moral character of any person as such, because in a way, a person who does not even gets involved into such activities may be far more immoral than even such sex worker as well, because this definitely is a very subjective concept. And that is why we know that these women are very much vulnerable, and they're treated unequally in the society. They're not given respect by the society. And ironically, these are the people who even choose to go to the brothels, and still on the next day, they choose to blame, and they choose to abuse the sex workers they made a use of, actually. So definitely we should be responsible in understanding that this also is a part of society. And maybe if we treat them with more respect and we treat them with greater concern, so definitely they will be given a chance to grow better in the society. So let's see that what have been the what have been the steps in the right direction in this particular issue. So Justice Verma Commission had said that we should have distinction between women who are trafficked for commercial sexual exploitation and adultery, which means consenting women who are in sex work for their own volition. So here, this was the exact thing which we have been discussing, that even the Justice Verma Commission said that there should be a clear distinction between these two kinds of women. Firstly, who were involuntarily trafficked into doing this job, and secondly, who on their own free will gotten into this business. And that is why we should be dealing with both the kinds of women differently and in different aspects. Secondly, if we talk about the judiciary, so it has been recognizing sex workers' right to livelihood as well. So when we talk about right to livelihood under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, that is right to life and liberty. So even the judiciary says that even the sex workers have equal right to livelihood. And if at all, this is the only livelihood option that they have, then we should be respecting that as well. And thirdly, the Supreme Court in the case of Buddhadev Karmaskar versus State of West Bengal in the year 2011 held that the sex workers have a right to dignity as well. So it is not just limited to right to livelihood, but also they have the right to dignity, and thus they should be treated with dignity and should be given equal treatment in the society. And if at all we look at the way forward, so the parliament must also relook at the existing legislation and do away with the victim rescue rehabilitation narrative, which we just were discussing, that not all the women indulged into the sex work want a rescue. They want rights as well. So as you know, we were discussing that they should be given some rights, some government policies, maybe education for their children, some kind of social security policies. So these will be all that would suffice the requirements of these women. Let's discuss the second article for the day, which talks about vaccine distribution. So it says that as the second wave of the pandemic recedes, India will face significant shortages over the next 6 to 12 months of the vaccine. So if at all we talk about the issues, so vaccine supply and allocation chaos ridden with multiple decision makers has definitely given great amounts of uncertainty, contradictory messaging, etc., all of which only aggravate the underlying problem of vaccine scarcity. So if we talk about the India's infection rates, So the true infection rate was 1.5%, and the reinfection rate, that the people were reinfected with the virus, was about 20%, which translates to a plausible infection rate of over 50%, or over what we call as the 700 million of people. So which means that the second wave has been even more disastrous than the third wave. And as this second wave is receding, we need to make sure that we do not fall in trap of the third wave of COVID-19, because that definitely will be something that we might not be able to take very comfortably. So the high infection rate could make the vaccine shortage less real if India does a good job of allocating and prioritizing existing vaccines based upon some combination of geography and demography. Though obviously these combinations have been already used till the time of second wave as well, but still we need to make sure that in the demography, amongst all the population of the country, the people who are more vulnerable. Now, who are more vulnerable? People that are aged maybe above 40 to 50 years, or those people who have some other kinds of comorbidities, like they have diabetes, cancer, heart ailments, blood pressure, etc. And that is why, or even the doctors or the frontline workers, like the police officials, the doctors, the nurses, midwiferys, etc. These are the people who are more vulnerable to catching the virus, and even they have lesser immunity to fight the virus. And that is why, keeping these terms and norms of geography and demography in mind, we should be setting up a combination that sets more effective distribution of vaccines in the country. And the latest research suggests that prior infection confers a fair amount of immunity. So if at all a person had been infected once, then he is considered to be more immune as a person who was never infected by COVID-19, and thus he seems to have better immunity in this regard. So if at all we discuss as to what should be our strategy in the distribution of vaccine into the entire population of the country, so we should explore partial dosing or vaccine mixing. So as we know that recently this concept has been popped up, that maybe if we try to mix various kinds of vaccines, or if at all maybe the first dose is of one particular vaccine and the second dose is of another vaccine, so there is a better chance, there might be a better chance that better immunity could be developed in the bodies, or better antibodies could be developed as well. Secondly, a technical team of scientists, epidemiologists, statisticians, health professionals, and others must come together to design a plan so that all the stakeholders or all the possible directions of vaccine distribution can be brought at one forum, and then they can discuss and decide accordingly. Thirdly, another round of countrywide surveys of seroprevalence should be done, through which we will be able to understand as to how many or what percentage of the population has now developed the immunity or antibodies towards the virus. Next, a larger share of the limited vaccines could then be devoted to these geographies. And then, of course, depending upon that which area has been, least has had the seroprevalence or has least immunity, so then we can prioritize these areas and vaccine distribution can take place in that particular manner. Then the use of data and science to minimize the magnitude of cost of the vaccine shortages, and definitely we should reduce the vaccine shortages and also the amount of that vaccine as well. And finally, effective allocation of the existing vaccines should take place as well. With this, we're done for the day. We hope it was a good and informative session for you all. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channels for such more updates to come. Thank you so much.